Hello and welcome to the Flaneurs. Today is Friday, it's late November and I'm just popping out to do a short video of Bermondsey. The main focus today will be Tower Bridge. The time is just past 3 o'clock on this Friday afternoon. I was trying to get out for about 1:30, 2 o'clock, but people just kept giving me work. But I think I've got lucky because we've had a really gorgeous day, clear blue skies, and the sun is fading now. It won't be long before we have sunset and dusk, and I think the light is just magnificent. We're walking down a very historic street called Shad Thames, and we're very close to Butler's Wharf and St Saviour's Dock. In Victorian times, this area known as Shad Thames was the largest warehouse complex in London. It was completed in 1873, and the warehouses housed huge quantities of tea, coffee, spices and other commodities. Some of the names of the wharves that you see here are such resonators of the areas. You'll see names like Vanilla and Sesame Court, Cayenne Court, Cardamom, Fennel, Caraway, Ginger, Cumin, Clove, Aniseed and Coriander, Cinnamon. They're all mentioned here. From about the 1960s, the PLA, Port of London Authority, and this area went into decline, and really the reason for that was containerisation. Containers could be taken on much bigger ships, and it was the ports further east of here, like Tilbury and especially Felixstowe, that really prospered at this time. They could take the much larger ships that housed the containers. So from about the early 70s, all the warehouses really started to close, and the area became populated. And it was rather run down at the time, it must be said, by artists like David Hockney and Derek Jarman. In the 80s and the 90s, the area was regenerated, so now you see the very high-end, high-value housing that we have here, with many accompanying restaurants, bars and shops. We're now out onto the Thames Path, and I hope you can enjoy the views that we see before us, the sun catching the City of London, buildings like the walkie-talkie, and most of all Tower Bridge in a certain way. I just think it looks magnificent. But the main purpose of this vlog today was really to show you the magnificent views on this winter's afternoon. Hopefully we'll be coming back to Rotherhithe many times to explore its great and wonderful history. Here we can see the famous St Saviour's Dock and River Neckinger. On this piece of information we can see before you tells you about the etymology of the River Neckinger. The name of the river is believed to derive from the term devil's neckcloth, a slang term for the hangman's noose. In London, Past and Present, published in 1891, Henry B. Wheatley argued that there was much good evidence that the Devil's Neckinger, the ancient place of punishment and execution, was the site of the Dead Tree public house on Jacob's Island. The famous London historian Walter Besant says that the Neckinger's early section, where it crosses the Kent Road at Lock Bridge, was also known as Canute's Trench. In 1016, Danish Canute the Great, who had earlier invaded England, dug a trench through Suffolk to allow his boats to avoid the heavily defended London Bridge. As we look at St Saviour's Dock, it's reputed that Charles Dickens sets portions of his novel Oliver Twist in the area of Shad Thames, at a time when it was an area of notorious poverty known as Jacob's Island. Apparently he set Bill Sykes' Den at the east of Shad Thames in a building adjacent to St Saviour's Dock. It is here that Sykes falls from the roof and dies in the mud. Others believe that the setting for Oliver Twist was north of the Thames in Clerkenwell. We'll see shortly as the camera turns around some high-end places to eat, and I believe it was here in 1997 that Prime Minister Tony Blair met US President Bill Clinton for lunch. One thing I love about this time of day at this time of year is that the light changes so quickly. You're really in a rush to capture a moment to capture a certain quality of light. If you miss it by a minute, then the picture can change completely. Also, I'm trying to pan in pictures of the wharves and warehouses and residential places along the Thames and onto Canary Wharf. I'm really glad to be able to capture some of these shots today. I'm rather envious of many of the Thames mudlarkers like Sci-Fines and Nicola White, who often include shots like this in their vlogs. As we look at these wonderful views and this magnificent bridge, I'll give you a brief outline of the history of Tower Bridge. It's a Grade 1 listed building built between 1886 and 1894. It's a combined bascule and suspension bridge and was designed by Horace Jones and engineered by John Wolfe Barry with the help of Henry Mark Brunel. The bridge is about 250 metres in length and consists of two 65-metre bridge towers connected at the upper level by two horizontal walkways and a central pair of bascules that can open to allow shipping. We spoke of US President Bill Clinton a few moments ago, and I believe he was stuck here once, waiting for the bascules to open. But I'm not sure it was on the same day that he was going to the South Bank to meet Tony Blair for lunch. Over 50 designs were put forward for the building of the Tower Bridge, one of them coming from Mr. London himself, Sir Joseph Bazalgette, the master of the sewer system, but his plan was rejected because of lack of sufficient headroom. A bascule bridge was the perfect solution because it allowed ships to reach the Pool of London, which sits between Tower Bridge and London Bridge. An Act of Parliament in 1885 authorised the construction of the bridge. However, it specified that the opening span would provide a clear width of 61 metres and a headroom of 41 metres, and the design had to be in a Gothic style. Construction was funded by the Bridge House Estates, a charity established in 1282 for the maintenance of London Bridge, that subsequently expanded to cover Tower Bridge, Blackfriars Bridge, Southwark Bridge and the Millennium Bridge. The two bascules, weighing over 1,000 tonnes each, are counterbalanced to minimise the force required, and this allows raising in 5 minutes at an angle of 86 degrees to allow river traffic to pass. We'll just leave Tower Bridge for a few minutes. We will come back to finish our story here, but I had the good idea, or it seemed a good idea at the time, of coming to the Christmas market by the Thames, which stands really around Butler's Wharf, Hayes Galleria, but on reflection it's a poor idea. It's really too busy today, and I think with all the lights here and all the attractions, it's going to look better to come back here in the dark. I think you'll get a much better video as a result, but I'll just show you a few minutes. But I'm not particularly pleased with the quality of filming, but it will give you perhaps a little flavour of what's going on the South Bank just before Christmas. We're back onto Tower Bridge now. Now, most people I know really love this bridge, but it wasn't always so. In the early parts of its life, there were lots of critics, one of them being Henry Heathcote Statham, who said it represents the vice of tawdriness and pretentiousness and a falsification of the actual facts of the structure, while Frank Brangwyn stated a more absurd structure than the Tower Bridge was never thrown across such a strategic river. However, sentiment seems to have improved over the last century. It was the architectural historian Dan Cruikshank, who we've mentioned before, especially around Spitalfields, who selected Tower Bridge as one of his four choices for the 2002 BBC TV documentary series Britain's Best Buildings. And in 1938, Benjamin Quisler, the New York Times film critic, wrote, "Three unique and valuable institutions the British have that we in America have not. 1. The Magna Carta, 2. The Tower Bridge, and 3rd, Alfred Hitchcock." Tower Bridge has been the setting and inspiration behind much music and TV and movies. I believe Bridget Jones' Diary 2001 and Bridget Jones' Edge of Reason were filmed here, as was The Mummy Returns and Paddington 2, and TV series such as Doctor Who, Day of the Triffids, and I believe an episode of Friends. We're now back on the north side of the River Thames, so to our right we see the famous St Catherine's Dock, and to our left the even more famous Tower of London. Daylight is really closing in now, the quality of light is deteriorating very, very quickly, but we'll just take a very quick look over a very busy streams of traffic where the Royal Mint used to be. And here we see the magnificent building of Trinity House and a very moving memorial with those merchant seamen and fishermen who lost their lives in the First World War. And it fittingly says, "For those who have no grave but the sea." And that's it from the Anglian Flaneurs today. I hope you've enjoyed our brief explore of Rotherhithe and a more detailed look at Tower Bridge. We're just going to have one last look at All Hallows by the Tower, but we're not going to do too much on that because that's a church we saw in last week's vlog. So goodbye from the Anglian Flaneurs.